Okay, time for a new video, and whether you are somebody new to my channel or you are returning to my channel to watch this video, it is greatly appreciated. As always, I'm filming this video in one go, so if I stumble over my words moving forwards, apologies about that. And also, if the quality of this video is fairly poor as well, if there's any lag, anything like that at all, sadly it cannot be helped, and hopefully it is not too much of an issue for you. This is yet another Eurovision related video here on my channel, and part 2 in which I go through your answers to my questions. A couple of videos ago, I decided to turn the tables a little bit and do something that felt a little bit more collaborative on my channel, and I asked you 15 questions regarding the Eurovision Song Contest. And I wasn't expecting much of a response at all. I didn't even think many people would see the video, but I ended up getting something like 60 plus comments, which I was very bowled over by. I am extremely appreciative, and it's definitely motivated me to do more videos like that in the future, where I ask you questions and vice versa. I think it's a nice thing to do every now and then. And last time out, I spoke for about 50 minutes, to the point where my voice was starting to ache. So I'm now going through the remaining responses. I've also got my Twitter page loaded up because I got 2 responses that way as well. So without further ado, let's continue where I left off last time with Eurovision. Fantastic. The first question: if Eurovision was in your country, where should it be staged and why? You're from the UK, and you said, I think Liverpool has actually been the perfect choice. Maybe next time it'll be Glasgow or Manchester, and I think I said in my previous video that if it was down to me, part of the BBC team and everything, I would probably have gone with either Manchester or Glasgow. Maybe next time. Cardiff's Millennium/Principality Stadium is close to you, but that'll probably be too big. I think that has a capacity of somewhere in the region of 65,000, but it does have a roof. So who knows? I believe they are building a pretty swanky new indoor music venue, something like that, in Cardiff soon anyway, so that would probably be better down the line. But I'm sure Eurovision will be held in Wales at some point. It seems right. After all, it's been in England a bunch of times, it's been in Scotland, so Wales and Northern Ireland next to tick off the list. Number 2, if Sweden won, how would you feel about it? I'd be a bit disappointed and underwhelmed. The song is good, but I think Finland winning would be more exciting. I'm inclined to agree. What's the worst part of the contest? All I can think of is that it's expensive, or maybe the 3-minute rule. I'll be honest, I'm not fussed about the 3-minute rule. I think it's fine as it is, but I can understand why people might want to tweak it down the line. Certainly it is expensive, and I think it's only going to become more expensive in the future, unfortunately. And I sort of expected very pricey prices here in the UK, because everything's shot up in price recently. But I do think more ways to make Eurovision affordable would be very welcome down the line. Question 4. Thoughts on other content creators? I myself am one of those people, and I enjoy making reaction videos, watching others and sharing opinions. I also think channels like WeWeBlogs do great things for the fans. I think with WeWeBlogs, and I did touch on them previously, part of me feels that their content is better for people who don't know as much about Eurovision. Maybe for the hardcore fans it's not as useful. I don't really know. Like I said, I only really watch their videos in April and May. Other times of the year it's very sporadic. The next question, thoughts on the fandom in general. You say I'm very grateful for the fandom as you've made friends through it, and it's great to get chatting to people who share the same interest as you. The fandom can also be a bit toxic sometimes. I think everybody has said this in response to my questions so far. One of the worst things about the contest, or thoughts on the fandom in general, is that it can be a pretty darn toxic place from time to time. And I do think it's getting worse, unfortunately, for whatever reason. Number 6. One thing you change about the contest. You changed the 3-minute rule and maybe the amount of people on stage. Now, I don't know here, but I think at Junior Eurovision, can you have more people on stage? I think you used to be able to, but not anymore. I don't know. Anyway, number 7. Do you prefer internal or national finals? You like a mixture of both. National finals are fun to follow if they're not too long. I agree. Your biggest growers, Armenia and Portugal. And your biggest faller is the UK, interestingly enough. A tiny bit, but not much. Fair enough. I do have a little something to say about Mae Muller at the end of this video. Cult classic from your country. From the UK, there's probably a few. I agree. National final you'd like to attend, maybe UMK or MGP, but to be honest, I don't think I'll travel to another country just for a national final. I think it's very unlikely for me as well, unless my financial situation and confidence suddenly goes through the roof. It's not going to happen for me, although I would like to attend more, absolutely. Or any. What do you say here about underrated or overrated? I guess it's all down to personal opinion. Yeah, pretty much. I needed to word that question slightly differently, to be honest. First memory of Eurovision. You say, watching it in 2006 when you were about 10, you were a fan of Lordi and Daz Sampson. Oh yes, Daz Sampson. I remember during the semi-final on BBC Three, he was in the not the green room, he was in the commentary box with Paddy O'Connell, just puffing away on a cigar, very cocky, saying that he was the people's champion. Yes, that fell flat on its face, did it not? Next question, attitude towards ESC in your country. It definitely seems to be improving, all thanks to both the last year and this year, I agree, but the media have been very quick to turn on Mae Muller ever so slightly, I think. More on that later. Question 14, soft spot country. You say Italy and Norway, but you also admire Iceland for being so diverse in their entries for such a small country. I agree. And in terms of a junior Eurovision act at the big show, you say that you could see Freya Sky doing it. Yeah, fantastic. She's done a few bits and pieces on CBBC, which is the children's television station here in the UK. And yeah, she was at the Brit Awards interviewing people on the red carpet, so she could definitely be involved with Eurovision in some capacity this year, and who knows, maybe she will be, but certainly down the line she could end up being a presenter or something, so yes, hopefully we'll be seeing more of her. Or indeed, singing on the adult stage. Thank you for your answers. Next up is Valentin Lepissier, which hopefully I'm pronouncing somewhat accurately, and I pronounce it like that because clearly you are from France. And your answer to question 1, if Eurovision was in your country, you say Strasbourg. I think the city is really charming and would be a great alternative to Paris or Cannes, showcasing a different French landscape. I wonder what your thoughts are on Nice being announced as the host city for Junior Eurovision later this year. Maybe you've been there, tell me all about it. If Sweden won, how would you feel? You'd be quite satisfied by it, I think it would be deserved. You enjoy the whole atmosphere of the song and the performance is out of this world. It is a very strong performance. The worst part of the contest, the voting section. We are still presenting the votes as if it was 1993, with a green screen behind, poor video quality, and sometimes technical issues. I think the technical issues are to be expected. It's a live show. Any live show has technical issues, no matter how much you rehearse it. In terms of the voting section for me, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the presentation of the results, but more the results themselves. They can be all over the place. Number 4. Thoughts on other content creators. You enjoy them, as it plays a massive role in the Eurovision season. Yes, I agree. Thoughts on the fandom in general. You're not a huge user of social media, but seeing some people getting torn apart for liking or disliking an entry because it just isn't their cup of tea can be exhausting to watch. That aside, seeing people supporting and respecting artists is quite heartwarming. Yes, I think one of the nice things about the fandom is how supportive we can be towards any act from any country. The downside is the online aspect of it, which is a huge part of the Eurovision season, unfortunately. I've already discussed this, but it seems as though a lot of people are on the same page. One thing you'd change about the contest, the return of an orchestra. Yes, I've thought about this as well. How would some songs work with an orchestra? How would Cha 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 sound with an orchestra for Finland this year in Liverpool? I'd be interested to know what an orchestral version would sound like. Would it have the same impact? Because we remember Zitti e Buoni for Maneskin a couple of years ago for Italy, and at Sanremo there was an orchestra and it sounded absolutely fabulous. So it can work with songs that maybe you wouldn't think an orchestra would work well with, but at the same time, would it really change our opinions on a track for the better or for the worse. You say it makes the performance way more thrilling and alive compared to pre-registered instruments. You're thinking of Armenia 2014, for example. Ah, yes, that would have been good with the orchestra, the strings and everything. That's a good point. Number 7, do you prefer internal or national finals? You've never dived yourself too much on national finals, but it just helps hyping up the overall contest. Yes, indeed. Biggest grower, Croatia. Ooh. And biggest faller, France, your own country. Évidemment. Interesting. Cult classic, Allez, Ola, Ole. Oh yeah, what a classic. That was good stuff. Juries weren't so keen, but the public really liked it. Jesse Matador, what a tune. If you could attend a national final, you say San Marino's, just to be bathed with 100 plus obscure tracks. Jokes aside, UMK, since their whole production has been really top notch recently. Completely agree. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Needs to be in a bigger arena though. Question 11. Underrated, overrated. Using those words for personal rankings seems a bit funny to me. Using them for prediction purposes, you don't really mind them. First Eurovision memory, 2014. Broadcasters and newspapers were all over the place with Conchita winning and France coming last. That was Moustache that year. I wanna have a moustache, and so on and so forth. That's how I basically knew about the contest. And then you started to get into it more in 2016. What a great contest that was. The general opinion towards Eurovision in your country. It saddens me to see that the general opinion towards Eurovision has not really changed even after Amir and Barbara Pravi came in. You've got to say that between 2003 to 2015 they were awful years for France, so I guess it didn't help the people to actually enjoy the contest. We are still mocking France as if every year we finish in the bottom 5. That's a shame that the attitude hasn't improved much, because I do think France's form in the contest, okay, last year's result wasn't great, but I think the quality of the songs has improved. And this year the song is very good, and should be up there, maybe even in the top 10. We will wait and see. She's a great performer. Your soft spot country is Portugal, because they've managed to keep up the quality since winning, and you admire them for that, and they take the contest seriously. And in terms of Junior Eurovision, you don't really watch it, but you'll go with Carla, since she became a big name. And she was great. That was Bim Bam Toi. And she's still releasing music and everything, so you never know. Maybe she'll be on the adult stage in a few years. Thank you very much for your answers. Sissa is next. Now, I can only see a couple of answers from you. Number 2, if Sweden won, you wouldn't be hyped at all. You prefer national finals. Your first memory of Eurovision was watching it live on TV in 2011. And your soft spot country is Greece, because you listened to their 2000s entries. And they definitely had this hot streak, many top 10 results in the mid-2000s. So I think that's a pretty good choice. Thank you for your few answers. Next up is Min Hinsti Dance. And you haven't answered all of them, but that doesn't matter. You're from Finland. If Sweden won, you've said that Tattoo is not far from Euphoria. You've seen comments like they don't deserve it because it would be unfair and boring. And I think this is such a dull opinion, and any hate directed at the artist or the country is unjustified. Your opinion is that as a Eurovision fan, everyone should be held responsible for their disappointment. How would you feel if she won? You don't know. You wouldn't be overjoyed, but you wouldn't be surprised if she came out on top. Obviously, it's never fun to see your favourite lose, but I love this contest too much to imagine myself frowning while watching the winner's reprise this May. That's a good answer. I would feel a little underwhelmed, but I wouldn't be sitting here thinking, what an absolute load of crap. I wouldn't be thinking that either. I'd just be like, okay, next year we're going to get a really well-produced show. Exciting times. Thoughts on the fandom? The fandom is so huge and outspread that it is impossible to say it's all toxic or it's all warm and welcoming. In general, I'd say we are all a tad bit detached from reality due to our obsessions. If you were to participate in Eurovision, you wouldn't have the guts to check what Twitter had to say about my song, because some people really don't know the difference between constructive criticism and outright bullying. I am inclined to agree there, absolutely. You only follow a few Eurovision-related blogs and channels. I follow a lot more channels than blogs, to be fair, and feel at home with these smaller communities of like-minded people. Fantastic. I think I said it last time out, but if not, I'll mention it again here. I'm not really a part of any fandom whatsoever, but I am a big Taylor Swift fan. And I follow a lot of people online who enjoy her music. They've been watching her perform in America recently. And I would say if that community is so welcoming and so nice, it's unbelievable. Everybody is very sweet, even though I'm not really involved with it at all. But if I decided to be a part of it, maybe I'd be welcomed with open arms. And if the Eurovision community was half as nice, that would be a lovely, lovely thing indeed. Anyway, biggest grower for you, Ukraine. Biggest faller, Serbia. Cult classic from Finland, Satta Salama in 1987. And also Nuku Pomin, but for different reasons. Well, Nuku Pomin that's a very unusual track. I think that was 1982, was it? Kojo. All I remember about that is the chorus and the drummer being out of time. Oh, dear me. A little bit all over the place, that one, but fair enough. Next up, thoughts on overrated, underrated. A song can apparently be both underrated and overrated at the same time. Scientists say this is the most baffling paradox since Schrodinger's cat. I wouldn't immediately discuss the opinion of someone who uses these words. Usually it is a question of context and perspective. Yes, indeed. Eurovision is something that's always existed in your life. Vague mixture of early memories, starting with EMD's performance of Baby Goodbye in Melfest 2009. That was Danny Saucedo. He was part of that group, and I think they finished third. And finishing with the grand final of 2014, which was the first year you didn't fall asleep before the winner's announcement. Fair enough. Attitude towards Eurovision in Finland. The older generation remembers the dark ages when Finland was constantly underperforming, and then we won it. When we won it, it was with a song sent by the devil. I tuned into a radio show some days after Karia's victory. The host had asked for the listeners' opinions, and they weren't happy to say the least. They said that we are embarrassing ourselves by sending Cha Cha Cha, and we'll finish last just like we always do. The younger generations definitely think more optimistically of Finland's potential in Eurovision. Surely the attitude in Finland towards Eurovision at the moment, though, has to be quite positive, because Cha 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 is a serious contender to win next month. So surely I can't imagine many journalists and people on the TV are saying that Finland are embarrassing themselves again and will probably finish near the bottom. I can't imagine that's being said at all, but maybe I'm wrong. I'd be very surprised if so. Your soft spot country is Iceland. A lot of enthusiasm, bringing something different all the time. Beautiful language too. Absolutely. Next up, thank you for your answers by the way, is Niam or Niam. You're from Sweden. If it was in your country, and it has been there many a time, you say Gothenburg. Stockholm and Malmö have already done it several times each. The old Scandinavium, is a bit decrepit though. A new one will apparently be built. It's shaped like a Pringle, isn't it? This sort of curved roof. It won't be ready for years. If Sweden wins in the next few years, which I fully expect, it will be held probably in the Friends Arena in Stockholm. There's too much gang violence and riots in Malmö, so you don't think it should be held there. I think the issue in Sweden is not so much the arena sizes, it's more a lack of hotel rooms. Yes, indeed, it's not just having an arena, of course, you have to have the infrastructure as well. And that sort of surprised me with Liverpool a little bit, because I'm not sure Liverpool quite has enough infrastructure in place. Certainly it's a city that doesn't have enough hotel rooms. Question 2. I don't know if you're joking here or not, but you say you would be extremely disappointed, sad and ashamed that your country would win with a derivative Euphoria copy when there are several much better songs that should win instead. That's a very interesting thought from somebody from Sweden. You say the worst part of the contest, is the juries. You hate that a handful of people can torpedo a winner for millions of other people. The jury's job should be to stop an Ike Huftgold from winning. The jury's job should not be to stop a Kano from winning, which is what they did. Interesting. Thoughts on other content creators? It depends, I'm rambling here, it depends on how interesting and knowledgeable they are. When a reactor is poorly educated and won't listen to basic advice, you just don't watch them. Thoughts on the fandom? When a fandom gets big, it has all sorts of people in it. The Eurovision fandom is nowhere near as toxic as the Star Wars fandom, for example. I don't know what else to say about it. I'm used to much worse, so you don't mind the Eurovision fandom. Fair enough. One thing you'd change about Eurovision, you would put national final rules in the EBU handbook. The rules should state that rigging and fraud in national finals is not allowed. I don't know if that'll ever be introduced. It's a very good idea, though. But all of that stuff is at the discretion of the national broadcaster. And I know Poland's the big one this year. They're not going to do anything about it. They don't want to be made to look bad, I guess. I don't really know what's happening there at all. We've got this whole controversy in Greece as well, which is happening pretty much during Eurovision. And I completely understand your point. I'm just not sure it's ever going to be enforced. I do think so-called rigging and things like that at the actual contest, the EBU should be coming down a lot harder on that. But whether they will or not remains to be seen. Do you prefer internal or national finals? You don't mind either way. Your biggest grower is Georgia. Your biggest faller is Estonia. Cult classic, you've gone with Waterloo and Euphoria. National final you'd attend, UMK, because it's by far the best national final, you say. I'm sure a lot of people would agree with you. Underrated, overrated. Sometimes they work, sometimes not. Your first Eurovision memory is Carola winning Melfest in 1983 with Fremling. Fremling. Yeah, pretty good song. She was only about 16, wasn't she? Thoughts on Eurovision in your country? You are Swedish. Eurovision is pretty much your national sport. Fair enough. In that case, sign up Zlatan, you know what I'm saying? Soft spot country, Ukraine, Iceland, Finland, and any country that has never won Eurovision. There's quite a few. Poland, Slovenia, Lithuania. That's fair enough. And you don't watch Junior Eurovision, which is fair enough. You've also left a comment talking about venues in Finland that could stage next year's event. I think it probably will be Helsinki, but who knows. Anyway, thank you for your answers. North Cub, you're from the UK. You would say Glasgow, because Scotland deserves some representation. It has been in Scotland before, but not for a long time. If Sweden won, you'd be disappointed, because even though She sells it well, the song is really nothing special. Fair enough. You were hoping the contest was moving away from commercial Swedish songwriting teams and more towards authenticity. Yes, indeed. The worst part of the contest, the bookies. You don't like the overanalyzing of everything, and some fans fixate on them way too much. I admit, I do look at the betting odds, but you absolutely cannot take them as gospel. Yes, generally they're fairly accurate, particularly pretty much the day of the contest. But we shouldn't just use them as the be-all and end-all all the time. I see it on Twitter a lot. People will post images of the betting odds. Oh, Latvia's moved up above Azerbaijan. Unbelievable. And I'm thinking, does this really matter much? Probably not. The ESC community, content creators, it's like any other YouTube community. Some content creators can be over the top or irritating, but many have great inputs and are very interesting to watch. The fandom, you say, is a mess, but in a funny way. It's no different to any other social media fandom. Lots of craziness and toxicity, but it could be much worse. Yes, indeed. I think we have to be a bit thankful that it is not completely toxic. You would change the rules so the time limit of songs is 3.5 minutes. 3 minutes is already quite restrictive. There's lots of songs that feel like they don't develop fully or have been hurt by the limit. And surely we can shave off 13 minutes of the intervals. Yes, I think we can. It seems interesting that a lot of people say that they would change the length of the songs. But a lot of people don't have great attention spans anymore. So maybe we should keep it the same. I don't know. Anyway, both overrated and... Oh no, I'm sorry. Internal or national finals. You say both have pros and cons. For the UK, I'm hoping that once we find our footing with internal selections, we can then start to look at a national final. But a genuine national final, not the BBC matching up X Factor rejects with Swedish songs, then putting it on BBC4 in the afternoon so only pensioners are watching. Fair enough, yes. I would like to see the UK have a version of Melfest, and I actually was going to make a video about this last year. I think I never got around to doing it. But I think it's a way off yet. And we don't want to copy exactly what Sweden are doing. We want our own version of it. Your biggest grower is Spain, and you've gone off Israel a little bit, but you never liked it much to begin with anyway. Cult classic. You've jokingly mentioned Gemini with Crybaby. It's definitely nothing post-2000s, so you suggest Love Shine a Light. What a classic, our last winner, Katrina and the Waves. Thoughts? Oh dear, I'm all over the place here. If you could attend a national final, you say Benidorm Fest and UMK. Thoughts on overrated and underrated? You try to avoid using them, to be honest. Sometimes you do, but often it feels like people use them to try and push their opinion as fact, or complain about not getting their way, and it generally gets quite annoying. Fair enough. You've seen people call Chanel underrated, which is when people use that term incredibly wrong, in your opinion, and I have to agree with that. How is finishing third underrated? First Eurovision memory. You didn't get into it until 2021, but you remember 2015. Your sister was watching it. She showed you a couple of performances. The main one was Georgia. That was Nina Sublati with the smoke machine enveloping her. And you also saw San Marino and our own entry. Not a good first impression. That was Electro Velvet. Oh dear me. Oh dear me. I'm sure that scarred your eyeballs, that did. Attitude towards Eurovision in your country. Skip because we're in the same country. Fair enough. Soft spot country, Greece as your half Greek. And you've left the Junior Eurovision question as well. There we go. Many thanks for your answers. Next up, Marcus CH. I can only see one answer for you in that regards. If Sweden won, you wouldn't be upset, but you would feel a bit disappointed because Lorene's performance stands in a way representative for the things that go wrong in Eurovision. In 2012, her song and especially her performance was innovative. In 2023, the only innovative thing for you are the technical visuals, or should I say the technical overdose, while the song itself and her performance are rather mediocre. For you, a live performance doesn't have to look like a video clip. That's not what interests you. Therefore, you're more Team Finland. This is innovative, unexpected, and also a bit rough, but authentic. In a way, they now stand at the point where Sweden was in 2012. Interesting. Thank you for your answer. Sarah Barrington Evans. I can only see a couple of answers for you, but let's go through them. Your soft spot country, or countries rather, Italy, France, Azerbaijan and Sweden. You think Italy wins your heart the most. They were your personal winner in 2015 and 2019. They all have a certain magic that gets your attention every year. You also feel Serbia is walking into your favourite country group. You say that you were excited to hear Lord of the Lost representing Germany, but you feel the song is not very good at all and a big disappointment. You know that band can do much better. You're a big fan of electronica, goth and industrial metal, so nearly all of the bands you love are German. And you blocked somebody who disagreed with you on a Facebook page. Oh dear me. Wee blogs you think go over the top about Eurovision, and they gush over everything, but you do watch them now and again. You think the people who announce their country's votes, the spokespersons, are often annoying. They constantly try to pad their part out. I remember one year the lady asked the hosts to guess who their 12 points were for. Well, back in 2006, the Dutch spokesperson, whose name I can't remember, but he's a bald guy, he gave out his phone number or something. He just dragged it out for ages. And a Slovenian guy who wanted a minute's silence for Slovenia because they did not qualify that year. Yes, I think his name is Peter. He gave out the points several times over the years. I know exactly what you're on about. They like to big up their moment, don't they? And have their moment in the sunshine. Thank you for your answers. Next up is Jack J68. JACJE68, apologies. You're Dutch. You want it to be in the Ziggo Dome. It's a good alternative to the Ahoy, but as you live in Rotterdam, you prefer the latter. Fantastic. If Sweden won, how would you feel about it? You find the return of individual artists undesirable. You think it's a sign of artistic poverty. There's an interesting turn of phrase. Worst part of the contest, the use of international artists during the interval acts. Yeah, I mean, Justin Timberlake was good, but Madonna, what was all that about? I'm not even sure she had any ties to Tel Aviv. And she didn't really sing very well anyway. I don't know. Apparently, there's going to be a major artist involved this year as part of the interval here in Liverpool, so who knows what that is going to be about. You limit the consumption of ESC content to ESC Tom Wee Blogs and Clarinet Moon. That's a great channel. I suspect other content creators of overly commercial motives. Interesting. Thoughts on the fandom in general? Anonymous comments lead to toxic discussions, and that is no different at ESC than at other events, to be fair. Something you change. The lack of jury points in the semi-final is a great loss, I agree. All songs should be made available at the same time as in the past. Each song has the same chance in that way. Do you prefer internal or national finals? After so many years, it's time for the Netherlands to experiment with the national final. Let's see what the Dutch music industry has in store. Your biggest grower is Latvia. Cult classic from your country is Vrade by Ruth. That was the 1993 Dutch entry and my personal winner in the year of my birth. What a classic, what a great performer. You didn't answer number 10. Underrated, overrated. These words are a reflection of personal preference and feeling towards the overall appreciation of the song. You see no reason to avoid those words. Cult classic, you say Maremolen by Geddy Lester. Or was that your first Eurovision memory? That was your first Eurovision memory, apologies. You were allowed to stay up late on the couch next to your parents. Fantastic. Attitude towards Eurovision in your country. The Dutch are generally critical of the submission, which I think is a good feature. Furthermore, a large part of the Dutch is not interested in Eurovision at all unless we win, of course. Then all those individuals are suddenly involved. That's a very interesting point. We didn't win, obviously. The UK didn't win last year. We finished second, but we're hosting on behalf of Ukraine. And a lot of people are suddenly interested in the competition when they never were before. How about that? Your soft spot country is Albania. You don't watch Junior Eurovision. You mentioned the fact that there were supposed to be 16 questions. There's only 15. I think question 16 was supposed to be your biggest grower and faller of all time. So a song that you like now much more than you did when you first heard it 15 years ago, for example. But anyway, thank you very much for your answers. Still quite a few more to go. Rigel ESC. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. You live in the rest of the world. So no one knows about Eurovision there, apparently. You think Sweden would be a deserved winner. The song isn't the best, but if there's any artist who deserves to win twice, it's Loreen. And Sweden, we know, can put on a great show, which they no doubt would do again in 2024. The worst part of the contest would be ESC being in May, because you're at university, and this year you literally have exams on every single live show day. Sometimes the cringiness and forced jokes are also up there in being bad. I agree. Humour is a very subjective thing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it is exceptionally cringy. Oh dear me. Well, I hope you pass your exams, whatever they're in. Thoughts on people like me? YouTube reactors are fine, the more the merrier. Although some of them could learn to have a bit more respect. Yes, they could. Thoughts on the fandom? You can't speak for Instagram, Reddit, YouTube, etc., but Twitter has gotten a lot more toxic the past few months, and you're not sure exactly what happened to make it that way. I agree. Twitter is sometimes just full of nasty comments, and I really do try and gloss over them. People don't think before they tweet a lot of the time. Absolutely the case. Moving on. You think juries should be retained in the semi-finals and countries should not qualify if they get 10 points or under in either vote, regardless of their score in the other vote, i.e. Boys Do Cry and Fade to Black would non-qualify in this scenario. Fair enough. You prefer national finals, especially well thought out ones that also showcase the local music industry and provide diverse, if not competitive, entries to Eurovision. That's a very good point. Your rankings don't change a lot, but your biggest grower is Belgium. Fair enough. Your biggest faller is France. Yeah, you didn't answer every question, which is fine, because you're from the rest of the world. If you could attend a national final, well, you're studying in Lithuania next year. Fantastic. So you'd go to their national final as much as possible. Possibly UMK and Melfest too. Overrated and underrated, you use those terms a little bit, but when using them you're always mindful of the scope of the word. Does it refer to the fandom or the actual result that it got? And of course, there's no such thing as a surefire qualifier. We only say that for Sweden or Ukraine, and even those powerhouses have had less than desirable results in their participation. You're fine with using them. You saw someone call Latvia overrated, and well, that's just not true. That surprises me. Latvia overrated this year. A lot of people are talking about that song, but I'm not sure it's overrated. But anyway, a very good answer there. Your first Eurovision memory was when it got cancelled. You'd never heard of the contest, and you were like, okay, I don't care. Fast forward a year later, and you're cheering on the Roop, and fast forward several months after that, and you're watching Junior Eurovision, FIC, and ESCZ. C'est la vie, I suppose. Yes, indeed. What a turnaround in the space of a year. Attitude towards Eurovision in your country. Well, I don't know where you're from, but they don't know that it exists, and fair enough, because it has nothing to do with us. Apparently, it was broadcast twice on the radio in the 1970s. Your soft spot country, probably Denmark. They've been a bit low-key since the 2010s, and you always wish that they could be back on equal footing with their Nordic neighbours. But you can't stand their entry this year. You're rooting for Georgia and Latvia instead. Fair enough. Junior Eurovision. The three I mentioned previously, but also Melanie Garcia for Spain. She'd be great. And also Olena Usenko from Ukraine 2021. Yeah, very powerful voice. She'd be great as well. Thank you for your answers. Oh, there's still so many more to go. How long have I been filming for? Oh, I might have to do a part 3, ladies and gentlemen. I don't believe it. Kasparix. You're Finnish, and you don't think there's any other venue than Helsinki that is suitable, so it should be there. You think Loreen winning this year would be a bit boring, because it would be very anticlimactic. And you don't think her song really brings anything new to the contest. She's very good at what she does and her song is powerful, but the song seems very calculated and specifically made to win Eurovision, and that causes it to kind of lack a soul, in my opinion. Yeah, very interesting. A lot of people on the same page with this answer as well. They'd be okay with her winning, but it would be anticlimactic at the same time. Worst part of the contest, the juries. They are supposed to bring balance to the results and to discourage political voting. But you think a common problem has been that they often vote more politically than the televote, and they sometimes seem to avoid good entries that are popular with the televote for no apparent reason. You're not sure if removing the juries altogether would be a good solution, but you think the jury concept needs to be renewed. Absolutely. Thoughts on content creators. You love them. They're a great way for one to find new ways to look at entries and to get a sense of the various factors that might influence a country's success. Thoughts on the fandom. You think Eurovision fans are a bit too aggressive when their support for a certain country spills out into hate for other countries. It could be a lot worse too, though, and I think the disagreement between fans is what makes the discussion so interesting. You also love when certain entries become memes among fans. One thing you'd change about Eurovision, you'd make jury voting anonymous. Well, it sort of is. At the moment, we know who's on the jury, but we don't know which jury member is which. We used to, but not anymore. But yes, that's a fair enough point. You prefer national finals, you're Finnish, and your internal selections were the worst garbage you've ever experienced, and it almost killed your love for Eurovision. Wow. Yes, indeed. Biggest grower, Iceland. Biggest loser after initial interest, Sweden and Switzerland. Interesting. I think Switzerland is growing on a lot of people, so it's interesting that you say you're going off it, but fair enough. Cult classic from your country, Hard Rock Hallelujah. It's rarely played anywhere, but everyone knows it. I imagine so. If you could attend a national final, you'd attend Melfest because it seems like so much fun and they put a lot of effort in. Overrated and underrated are good words to use when describing one's own lack of understanding for how others seem to think about a song. One should always make sure to emphasize that one is only presenting one's own opinion of what is underrated or overrated, rather than some sort of universal truth. Your first memory of Eurovision is your dad and sister agreeing that Lordi could not win Eurovision before the final in 2006, and the reason I remember their discussion is because Lordi actually ended up winning, even if you were too little to actually watch the show itself. Oh man, I imagine the newspapers in Finland the day after Lordi won, just full of it. Their faces on the front. Finland win at last, something like that. Fantastic. Attitude towards Eurovision in your country. It's become more positive, but many Finns still seem to see Eurovision as entirely political. Talking of which, there was a general election in Finland yesterday. Part of the Finnish attitude also involves claiming that you don't care at all about the competition, whilst simultaneously rooting very hard for Finland. Yes, a sort of secret admiration for Eurovision, perhaps. Do you have a soft spot? You have a positive bias towards Iceland, and you have no thoughts on a junior Eurovision act going to the big adult competition. Shall I go through one more answer? I think one more, and then I'm going to have to do a part 3. Unbelievable. Thank you so much for your answers. Next up, and the last person in this video, is Borut Petrovic. You're from Slovenia, and the Arena Stožice is the only venue that you think is suitable. No other stages are big enough. If Sweden won, you'd say, oh well, but you prefer other countries getting the trophy with more original songs. The worst part of the contest, corruption of the juries. A lot of people have said that. They agree with you. Thoughts on content creators? You greatly appreciate the reactions from some of them. You mention Alicia, Michelle, ESC Tom, The Peace Around. That's a fantastic channel. And myself, very grateful. Thoughts on internal or national finals? Some countries are much better suited for national selections, but for your own country it makes much more sense to opt for internal selections. Last year LPS won, and you disapproved of such a democratic vote, as I thought other performers like Luma were way better. This year you're happy with an internal selection. You're sending a good quality band that is more competitive. Absolutely, it really is a more competitive track. Your biggest grower is Croatia. You liked Romania, but not so much anymore. In terms of overrated and underrated, you tolerate them, but you prefer not to read or hear them. You think they're annoying. Last year, so many people said LPS was underrated, and it was rightly underrated as it finished last. Attitude towards Eurovision in Slovenia, neutral or mildly negative. With more Eurovision success, this could change. Soft spot country, Serbia. You appreciate how innovative and daring their entries have been in the last couple of years, and you only watched Junior Eurovision last year, but you'd like to see Georgia's singer again on the bigger stage someday. That was Mariam Bigvaba, and of course, the co-songwriter of that song, Iru, is the Georgian representative this year in Liverpool. Fantastic, great answers. Wonderful to have a comment from somebody from Slovenia, and indeed all of the other nations involved. Netherlands, Germany, Finland, Denmark, Malta to come. Oh, fantastic. What a range of nations involved. I'm very, very grateful. These videos, this is the second one of course now, very, very rambling and that sort of thing. But there will be a part 3, because I've rambled for long enough again now. 42 minutes, dear me. Anyway, thank you again for your responses, and I will go through the remaining few in part 3, so stick around for that. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, thanks again, and bye for now.